This episode of the In Focus series features Joshua Stebbings. Joshua is an Australian combat sports photographer working on events like Legion, Valor, Hex Fight Series, and the UFC.
Mr. Lou, oh my God.
Hello, Josh.
A lot skinnier then.
We have Josh on the show tonight. How are you?
Not too bad, Mr. Lou. How's yourself?
Not too bad. You're keeping me up late at night time, way past my bedtime.
My apologies for that, but alas, I'm a bit nocturnal myself. So
yeah, like I said earlier, this is going to be a slightly different format, but we're going to take it as we go along.
This is Willy Lou up late.
Yep. Anything can happen.
Indeed.
Yeah. How about you just quickly tell everybody where you started from and how you came to be our UFC photographer?
Okay, so how I came to shoot combat sports?
How you came to shoot half-naked dudes in short shorts?
Okay, well, I mean, it's an interesting history because going back to, say, late 2000s is probably when I started to get into MMA. Now, the only clip, my only real exposure to MMA, you know how you'd have like those wins and fails compilations and that sort of thing. I saw one of a dude trying to check a kick and the kicker's leg just snapping around the other dude's leg.
That's a bad start.
Yeah, really gruesomely. And I was like, I don't know what sport that is, but I am never, ever watching it. Then my best mate and co-shooter, who Willie's also familiar with, and many people listening will be familiar with, Paul, he started watching some UFC. And initially I was like, nah, dude, not keen, don't care. I saw what happened to that dude's leg. I'm not interested. And I think probably the thing that first turned the corner into me being a bit more interested was playing one of the early UFC video games. Then we started to watch a few cards here and there. And
sorry to interrupt. Was that UFC 2009 on PS3 platform?
I suspect it was the first one. And 2009 sounds about right.
Yeah, it was THQ.
10. Yeah, and we only had the demo, so it was only Shogun versus Shogun.
Jones.
Was it? Rashad?
Jones? Okay.
No, Rashad, I'm pretty sure. So basically ended up getting into it a big way. One of the people I'd probably credit most for getting into MMA and BJJ would be BJ Penn. And pretty soon watching it wasn't enough. I became pretty obsessed and started basically completely unrelated. I'd bought a DSLR camera because I'd done some shooting in high school. Really missed doing that. So kind of due to unrelated circumstances, had a DSLR and I started just kind of rocking up to MMA events with my camera and getting as close to the cage as I could. And if you've got a DSLR around your neck, for people who don't know what a DSLR is, it's the kind of professional camera with the attached lens and looks all very swanky.
It's that thing on the screen right there.
Where? Yes, indeed. Yeah. The thing I'm holding there. One of them cameras. So basically, at first it was just a case of let's see what I can get away with. And when you've got that camera around your neck, people tend to assume you're actually meant to be there. And just kind of built from there. Initially, it was a long road to actually getting paid for anything I did, which I think probably a lot of creatives have been through similar. I'm sure it was probably similar for you initially. But yeah, one thing led to another.
Right thing on top, that's called exposure. We get paid in exposure.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Unfortunately, my landlord doesn't accept exposure, but I mean, it's nice that aside.
I actually was following you very early on, and I like to think of our journeys as well. And I think the main difference is I would have started maybe just about a year earlier than you. And then I got into the scene a little bit earlier than you.
You definitely started earlier than me.
Not by a milder, because I knew you were approaching me, so I had to push my game.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, shout outs to Legion.
Legion.
They're a Tasmanian Muay Thai promotion.
Sorry, what promotion?
Look, Tasmanian. Sorry, is it Muay Thai? I don't know. I just shoot.
I'm going to shut this off.
Hey, I respect the martial art. It's great to shoot. I just don't necessarily know what it's called. And they do MMA as well. So I can pronounce that. We're good there. Look, I know that you went first purely because you were actually one of the people who I kind of looked at when I was getting started and kind of took an assessment of what's the lay of the land, who's good, what's some stuff to aspire to. And I remember basically, to be brutally honest, and don't get a big head about this, the two initial main drivers to actually get into shooting were basically you and Esther Lynn, who people might be aware of. What outlet does she shoot for again, Willie Lou? Remind me.
MMA fighting.
That's the one. Absolutely amazing MMA photographer, and I'm sure you should get her on your show one day if you look through.
Oh, she's on the list. She doesn't even know it yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've met her twice, so I'm happy to put in a good word. I exchanged 2 words with her when I did meet her, for what my good word will be worth. But anyway, basically,
I'm flattered that you actually had me on a radar from back then, because I had you on my radar too, watching you grow along the way, having your logos change from the army stenciled Joshua Stebbings photography to having that little dude kicking your name.
Yeah, well, like I said, probably the initial influence was Esther Lynn in terms of, and a lot of people are listening, if they look through her shots, a lot of them are incredibly iconic. If you follow MMA, whether you know it or not, you would know her shots. And so she was kind of the initial way I caught the bug. I'd gone through and looked at the EXIF data of her photos and checked what she was shooting with and stuff like that. And you were probably the first guy I really encountered in the local scene. I dare say it was because I'd been called to shoot a show you had been shooting, AFC. And pretty much you've been a big influence and someone whose shooting I really respect since then. It's a weird profession at times. It can get very competitive, but I've always enjoyed your work and enjoyed actually shooting with you on the few occasions we've been able to.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Before I actually met you, I've stalked you for years and then began Facebook messaging you.
That doesn't sound creepy at all.
Not at all. Honestly, I'll stalk everyone on my radar. Maybe it's just the introvert in myself trying to suss out the competition, seeing what they're doing, seeing what I'm not doing. And we actually got talking because of that promotion. There was some shit going on. I got treated pretty poorly, so I left. And then you had a similar encounter, and that's how we bonded over those moments. I mean, people think you being ringside, you being cage side, it's all fun and games, but the crap you go through with, it's almost like you're the last people they care about. There's always someone that's going to do it for free. So when I met you in person, it was actually very nice, and we clicked pretty quickly. And I've got to say, I love all your cage shots of me.
Yeah, you've done a few of me I really like. I like the one you photoshopped a bit where I'm editing and you've done the whole world of magic as I edit.
But I first met you at Hex 2, I believe.
Probably.
Yeah. And when I first...
In fairness, as you point out, though, we'd been well and truly on each other's radar for many years by then. So by that point, it was actually... like often, as I said, photography can be very competitive and you get protective of your turf and that sort of thing. But I was like, awesome. I've always wanted to shoot with Willie. So I was really happy about that.
We took about like 5 selfies that night too. And when I spoke to you,
we did.
Yeah.
My hover hands.
I felt a weight lifted off my shoulder because I didn't know what you would be like. I said, oh, please be a good guy. Please be a good guy. And man, you were very chilled.
Yeah.
I think I even drove you home that night too.
Yeah, I think you did. You did for a couple of them. I think we shot 3 together, was it?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And countless stories.
Indeed.
What do you remember about this event?
So this is the inaugural, and look, a really, got to give the moment its gravity, a really huge moment for anyone who has followed MMA in the state of Victoria, in the nation of Australia. This is the first ever cage fight in Australia after they were... Actually, the first ever in Australia or just the first ever in Victoria? I think they'd done
Victoria.
WA before that, hadn't they? First ever in Victoria, sorry.
Sorry, the first time they had the cage was in Sydney because the laws was a bit loose there, and also Queensland too. So Victoria happened and then WA followed.
So, first ever cage fight in Victoria, as the recently elected Labor government had changed the laws. Unfortunately, the previous Liberal government and the Greens were against the cage being legal. I mean, they had their basis and rationale for wanting that, but I think obviously anyone who knows the sport knows that the cage is much safer for the athletes. So this is a really, really big moment in the history of combat sports in the state of Victoria.
Yep.
I seem to remember, though, that there was some difficulty actually getting the ribbon cut.
I think there was.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Memory. No, you have a good memory. A big guy like the Hulk, he struggled a little bit.
Well, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I remember there being like, hang on. Yep, no, we're good.
Yeah. I think this was about our 4th or 5th year into shooting combat sports in grappling and kickboxing and MMA. So for me and you to be cage side at this event was really special, not just for our growth, but just being a fanboy ourselves. And you know how, like you said, it was such a big event. You would have photographers from large media outlets like The Sun and The Age, and some of them, they were just there to get like those bloody brutal shots and whatnot. But it was a very busy scene cage side with so many other photographers. People like me and you who were used to being the only guy shooting had to battle with other people who weren't there to capture the sport as fans, if that makes sense.
I think it's always interesting when that happens. I've noticed that in the few UFC cards I've shot as well. You'll have media outlets that might turn up purely just to shoot the main event, and so they've got a seat allotted to them. Cage
their credentials, I'll just bump you out of the way.
Yeah, and not only that, because they're obviously taking up that seat, there's 10 other photographers who can't. And it's really difficult. I mean, you've got to understand at a certain point, it's just how the world works, you know, like the Age doesn't need to photograph every fight. They're not there as fans. They're there to get some shots as news. So often there's this moment where you kind of look around at these empty seats and you think,
it kills us as photographers and fight fans, how that seat could be used.
Taken up by someone who shoot the whole show and love every moment of it. Exactly.
Also, going to what I said, it was filled with so many photographers. We met Elvis there as well, and your mate Paul was shooting there as well. Elvis Paul. What do you remember shooting that event? And that was my first time shooting in front of a cage, so I was a little bit nervous myself. What challenges do you have? Did the weights of that event have added to any pressure?
So I guess initially, shout out to Hex. They do a really good pro show. I don't shoot with them anymore, but certainly no hard feelings there. They do a really good product. So this was probably not my first Hex. I think this is my second or third, judging by the guy standing.
You shot the first Hex in the ring.
Yeah. Yes, I did. Yeah. Out at Springvale.
Yeah.
Yep. So basically you'll see on the left side of the cage door, there is my very good friend, Matthew McKee. Shout outs to him. He's also done my last few emblems or watermarks for my page. So I've always tried to have a second shooter wherever I can. The reasons for that multifaceted. I've got to be honest, a part of it is just I really love what I do and I love sharing it with my very good friends. So I have frequently brought along other people to shoot with me as long as they had a pretty good idea what they were doing with the camera. And that's what Matt did for me on this event, shot with me, gave me a second angle. And yeah, look, I think there's always a bit of nerves, which I find very interesting because I'll often be pacing around. And I've got to be honest, until the first fight starts, I hate fight night. Like, just let's go, let's get started, let's do it. Until that moment, it's just nerves and, oh, come on, let's get on with it.
You mean at the venue or the whole day?
Oh, no, just kind of once you get to the venue and you can feel the atmosphere, it's all about to happen. I've tended to find, like, I always have this moment where I feel that bit of nerves and then I have a good laugh and I think, you're not going to get punched in the face. You have nothing to worry about. You know, dude's out the back.
Sounds like you're almost fighting yourself.
Yeah, sometimes. I have found, though, the more I've shot, the less that's the case. I know when I initially shot, I was incredibly nervous. And I think over time you learn to have faith in your shooting and that sort of thing. I mean, I was so nervous when I initially shot that I couldn't even remember a fight once it was finished. I was so just completely focused in capturing it. And I found in terms of actually being able to shoot a fight and enjoy it as a fan and also get the product I want as a photographer took probably 3 or 4 years to get to that level of comfort. I love it though, because I love being able to have the level of doing what I need to do professionally and also enjoying a fight as a fight fan.
You need those butterflies. It keeps you on edge. You can't be too overly nervous because you know, your hands get shaky, your mind's not there, you can't be too relaxed, otherwise you don't give a fuck about any fights. I remember the first 4 or 5 years, I actually remembered every single fight I shot because that was how much obsessed I was with the sport. And also I was thinking about each fight I was shooting, you know, thinking about the potential sales, who would I hit up. So it was all always running through my mind. And going back to what you said about getting to the venue, I have a little process in my mind. I like to suss out the environment first, make sure I have the right spot in the ring or on a cage, talk to the promoter, talk to the people ringside, get my bearings right. So in case I have to leave for the night, I know my spot will be taken care of. I can trust the people around you.
That is the most nerve-wracking part, though, isn't it?
The spot?
Finding your spot and then like trying to demarcate your spot. Be very like leave a sign of some sort saying my spot. And if you leave and come back and your spot's been interfered with, night ruined.
Yep. And that gets in the way when you want to do your backstage shot. But sometimes I think the most flattering thing I can get at promotions is when I get a little piece of paper, even like a little post-it note that says Will Lou, cameraman. I'm like, fuck, I made it.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it's understandable. They've got so many things they're concentrating on and so many things they need to worry about to have their night go well that sometimes the sign for a photographer isn't the highest priority. But it's like you'd be surprised how much difference just having a reserve chair actually makes to your sense of well-being as you approach shooting the night.
Definitely, man. I started very young. So when I say young, 20, 21. So I could afford to make many mistakes as a kid. I would do things like call up the promoter on the day of the show. Hey, are there any parking spots? Can I get a ticket? Can I come shoot at the show? I was that kid doing it, but I was young enough to make these mistakes. So yeah, it was a learning experience, but you need that level of professionalism. Like I said, if you have a camera over your neck, people think, you know your thing, they'll take you seriously. But with that camera, you need to live up to that role.
Are you suggesting that with great cameras comes great responsibility?
I didn't want to say that, but yes.
Yes, you're right. Now that's look, something that's, I guess, a bit of an... And I'd be interested to hear what your view on this is, because I think we've very probably approached our shooting from very different places. I've always worked a full-time job, and any income or anything like that that I have made through photography has always been complimentary. And as a result of that, I haven't necessarily treated it like I would a job. And by that, I don't mean that I have been unprofessional, but I've said and done things that
You've pushed back. Something I wouldn't do, but I respect you for doing that. And that's something we bond over.
Well, when I've been, like, typically, obviously, when you're doing something full-time, you rely on it for money, it's your full-time profession, you're very gentle about how you negotiate certain things. For example, if you shoot for a promotion that messes you around, doesn't pay you, you might handle that sort of, quietly and very diplomatically. Whereas I've been in situations where that had happened to me, and I would normally, if it was my 5-day a week day job, I might have handled it very differently. But I figured that I have a day job. I don't need to put up with this crap outside of it. So I'm just going to directly call it out. Yeah. And so I think me and you have always had a different approach there. And look, I have at times, how would I put this? Reaped the whirlwind of my approach, and people have chosen for one reason or another not to work with me because I'm very direct in that sense. And I get that, but I get the feeling you've always tended to approach it a bit more
diplomatic.
More, I don't want to say professionally, because I like, even when I have been very direct, I feel I've still worded it professionally, if you know what I mean. But anyway, how have you approached that dynamic?
I'd say pretty diplomatic. Just quickly, how old were you when you first started shooting?
2012 was my first show. How old am I now? Really old.
I'll blank it out.
27. Okay. No, it's fine.
I started 2021, so I was still growing as a person too. So I was able to take a lot of crap. I take a lot of I wouldn't call it verbal abuse, but being pushed around. I just took it as, because I was still training and competing at the time. So I grew up in that gym environment. So for me, it was just part of the process. You just have to work your way till you get there. You have to work until you get their respect in a way.
I definitely felt I had to do that as well. It's just I realized once I got to a certain point, and this is something I was actually thinking when I was showering to prepare for this wonderful cast. I was actually thinking in the shower that you there is really a period where you're out in the wilderness for a while. You kind of have to cop anything, and that is where you tend to see the very competitive photographers, the photographers who might not necessarily be friendly if you shoot with them a show, have the cards very close to their chest, might not even chat to you. I find that once you get beyond a certain point where you know that your product is legit, you know that you can provide the product you want to provide when shooting combat sports, the need to be like that, I think, really goes away. And
I think we're both past that point now. Like you and
exactly.
I joke about that all the time. We see people coming up and doing that. And that's one of my pet peeves. I tell you, when I'm at the show, I'll do my normal routine, but if I see anyone with a camera, I make my effort to go up to them and say hello, let them know I'm there. I'm trying to be friendly because that's the person that I wanted to have approach me when I first started. And there's sometimes when people would come up to me later in my career sucking up to me saying, oh, Will, I love your shots, this and that. And then the next month I find them sucking up to promoters saying, hey, I've worked with Will before. Can you please get me on? I know him. We've worked together for years.
And you've literally spoken to him once, yeah.
Or I'll speak to them and they'll say to me, oh, this is my first time shooting a show. And then I'll see a whole folio of other gyms that they've done. Or they'll say to me, oh, I'm just trying to get some experience and nothing more. And I find them making a page called Fight Photos Australia. Come follow us, best fight photography.
And to be clear, neither of us, I think, at all minds having competitors. I find, if anything,
just be transparent.
Yeah, well, just like I don't know, just you don't need to act like we're at war. Like if we're shooting the same show together, cool. Let's shoot the shit as two photographers. That said, I can be a little bit shy myself, so I do sometimes understand not necessarily being outgoing and introducing yourself and stuff like that.
Well, that's why I make my effort because I'm pretty shy and introverted myself. That's why I make the first move to let them know that, hey, you can talk to me. Hey,
have you ever had that just go very badly? Just like, no, thanks, I'm good.
Yep. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Anyway, let's go on to the next topic. What are your pet peeves? I'll start by telling you one of my pet peeves are people in the crowd or mums with those flashes that start lighting up the whole fights and then it makes you miss your shot. But in this case, it was just the lighting setup because I think it was the first time the cage was in place at Hex. So I think the lighting crew was still playing around with different settings and I might have missed the winner shot. What are some of your pet peeves at shows?
Well, first off, no surprise to see Nick Patterson not socially distancing from the ref. That aside, that's a little bit of an in-joke. You can edit that out. Yeah, look, one of my biggest pet peeves is not even so much when it's like the mum in the crowd with the flash, but there's a guy actually cage side with a DSLR and he's using a flash. And like, there's two reasons photographers hate that. And I think we need to be honest about what one of those reasons is. I mean, one of the reasons is obvious. It's stupid. They're fighting. You don't want to cause a distraction. Like, I mean, it's incredibly unlikely, but let's say that flash catches them in the eye while a punch is coming over and, all of a sudden you have incredibly negatively impacted the fighter for the sake of a photo. The other reason that we have to be honest about, if we wanted to use a flash on every shot, we could significantly reduce the noise in our photos. We could, you're
getting
we could potentially. Sorry, what was that?
You're getting way too technical for me now.
Okay, sorry. Let me explain in layman's terms. We could get much better quality photos if we did that, but we don't do that because we don't want to harm or potentially risk harming a fighter. And so when you're sitting there next to us, with your flash going, a part of me is thinking, oh damn, like even on a high fast shutter, a little bit of flash would really up the quality of this photo, but I can't. And then some guy next to you who's, let's be honest, is probably not taking good quality photos.
They think that the
Yeah,
flash
exactly.
their photo.
Because if they're using a flash shooting in MMA, they have no idea what they're doing.
And
Sorry,
they don't
but
understand the magnitude of what could go wrong if someone
exactly.
couldn't see, and bam, they get killed.
And so, look, there's a level where you get that, and you're like, yeah, you know, the guy doesn't know better. He's not deliberately being a dick. He just doesn't know better. But, you know, I've told people stop using the flash. And I don't know if they just don't actually know how to turn it off. But anyway, which reminds me, actually, because obviously me and Willie Lou have often, sorry about that I keep calling you Willie Lou. I don't
You call me whatever you want.
Mr. William Lou, Mr. Sir. I can't even remember what I was going to say, but hang on, it'll come back to me. I think I'm probably a good deal more introverted as well. So much of my rage is self-contained in those moments. But yeah, it is definitely a pet peeve. I mean, other pet peeves in terms of shooting is, like we were kind of saying earlier, not kind of having a spotter sign for you and the whole night kind of having to try and fight for space.
You're sitting for 6 hours working, you need the utmost focus. At the least I can do is give you a chair and have you be comfortable. But then again, some people might not understand what goes through the minds of a photographer with your workflow and your process.
Exactly. Absolutely, exactly. At the end of the day, I always try and think of, view things through other people's shoes. So if I was running a fight promotion, I hadn't previously been a photographer myself, things like that probably wouldn't occur to me to the same extent. So, and typically, once I've made that need clear, I've really never had a promotion that's like, oh, well, deal with it. Generally, that need has been supported and sorted out.
I think even when it comes to delivery of the photos, photographers tend to, even myself when I first started out, you can get too technical with all this crazy lingo and jargon that promoters won't understand. You'll say to them, oh, I'm going to give you all the raws and then I'll give you the watermark ones and these are web rares, but you can't use this for these promotions. A lot of them won't understand that. They want to know if they can use these photos, can they be used on Facebook and posters? You have to think about what they would want at the end of the day.
Speaking to that for a second, I was talking earlier about being, I guess, oh, shut up, what's that? Hang on, let me close that so it's not going to keep beeping at me.
Real professional, Josh.
I know, right? I'm fucking terrible, mate. Go away. There we go. And turn my phone on silence, probably a good idea too. It's snowing in Tasmania. What a turn up for the books. All right. So I touched on earlier the fact that I've probably been more direct sometimes than if I did it full time. One of the things that has been just a non-negotiable for me, that kind of touches on what you were just discussing. It's a pretty kind of age-old principle that if a photographer shoots for you, he retains property of the photos. There are exceptions. I would entertain exceptions to that, but I would charge much, much more for it. So if you want to own my photos as opposed to just have, and to be clear, I give any promotion I shoot for unlimited license to my photos. So they can use my photos for posters, they can use it for promotion on Facebook, they can use it for whatever they like. I don't in any way restrict that access to them. But one thing that I have been absolutely rock solid on that's probably got me removed from a promotion or two, if I'm brutally honest, were when promoters actually approached me and said, we would own your photos. And that's something where if I hadn't been had a full-time job as well, if I didn't have a full-time income to sustain me, I might have swallowed that. But there have been promotions where I've said, no, look, that is absolutely non-negotiable. I will always retain ownership of my photos, but you have an unlimited license to use them as you want. And so I think sometimes, as you say, it is about that level of communication. So obviously as a promoter, you don't want to hear, I can't use your photos. So you need to be very clear on the fact that they do have that unlimited license, but you will retain the property rights to them, so to speak.
Well, flight photography for me wasn't my full-time gig. It was my side income, but it was doing pretty well. So I still wanted to maintain a level of networking to build on to for the years to come. So I was very careful with what I said, moving on from whatever issues I had with promoters. I tried my best not to burn bridges. Of course, there were a few people that we didn't want to talk to after a while, but you learn to avoid people like that, and people like that, they get found out.
there are definitely some bridges in this industry that I would say are worth burning. I'm not going to go particularly far out of school. I'm not going to name names, but there is, one promotion that never paid me. The communication around it was fairly appalling. Certainly, it's not Hex, it's not Legion, it's not Valor, and from there you can kind of figure it out yourself.
So it's an MMA show.
Yeah,
Okay.
an MMA show, and I would say that they are one of the bigger ones in Australia. So, like I said, figure it out from there. That is a bridge that I'm only too happy to have burnt, because if you're not going to pay me for my product, and you're going to kind of mess me around, and then when I try and get paid, you're going to try and intimidate me, that is a bridge I'm more than happy to burn.
But if you were close to the scene and you realize everyone else in the industry has a very similar story with that one promotion or that one promoter, it's not just you.
Yeah, no, look, the stories about that particular promotion are many and varied. And I think, I wouldn't have, if the situation happened again and the arrangement was the same, I would not shoot for them. It was a case of them being a very big promotion very early in my career. Oh, we're interested. It's always a very similar post. We'd love to have some photographers come and, see how they go, have, fun. It's always very much framed as in, come get some experience. And they're not necessarily looking for a pro photographer. They're looking for a free photographer. So that was how I kind of came to shoot.
You will never be short for free photographers, but then you must realize the quality won't be as well, and you won't get what you want from them.
Well, yeah, what I would say is, like, I would love to make people understand what it is they get when they pay for me or you, as opposed to having, someone who's really keen, loves the sport, doesn't necessarily have the experience, but is happy to shoot a show for free.
It's about protecting your brand too, and how they capture your show is going to reflect on you too. If they start taking all these bad photos of your show, the general public will look at those photos and base your promotion, base your brand off that. Whereas
Absolutely.
me and you, we've handled promotions before. We know how to look after a brand and shows.
And I think, one thing that is a really big focus for me is I always want to do a really good job of telling the story of, like, both people in the ring. And there's almost no worse feeling for me when I get back and look through my shots after a fight night, and I can see that I just don't have that many great shots of fighter one. I've got some great shots of fighter two, and fighter one's not exactly where I'd want it.
I feel the same way as you, because after a while you get connected to the sport, you get connected to the fighters, and you feel for them too. You want them to have a fight, but come home with some decent photos too.
So me and William have had that feeling again and again and again, which is not to say that if you look through our rolls of those fights that there probably weren't great shots of both fighters. We're looking for something different, and we know what we're looking for. So I think we've had that moment where we've gone, I didn't get what I want, and we've had it over and over again for the first 4 or 5 years we shot. So now when we shoot, we know that we want to show off both fighters. We know we want to tell a story of the whole event, and we know that we want the photos to be high quality. We've done the wrong things. We've done the things you're not meant to do. We've seen they didn't work, and we don't do them now. So when you lay down the cold hard cash to have me or William Lou shoot for you, you are paying for nearly 10 years of experience shooting combat sports. So there is a difference. And it's not to say that any new person with a camera should stop. That's how I got to the point I'm at. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone from kind of going down that path, but I do want promoters to realize that when you pay that, hopefully $500,
hopefully
vaguely negotiable, vaguely, that you are getting something for that money. At the end of the day, I wouldn't want someone to pay a premium if they weren't going to get a premium product. So, works for both ends.
And I do see some photographers coming in and showcasing some very nice highlights of one event, but as a fight photographer in the industry, you must produce that same quality of work, show after show, and be consistent with your work. Don't just take these cool bokeh looking shots just for your own portfolio and then fuck off. You're there to make the brand look good time after time again. And I feel like if you're working with a promotion, you have a working agreement to keep working with them to work as their team. You're not really just coming in and out at your own will.
Yeah, I particularly found that with Valor. I mean, after a while,
You got a guy for Valor and Legion.
well, I don't know. Valor ended up in a bit of a mess, but there was a time where, I mean, we were a very close-knit crew, and I was to some degree helping. If Grant hears this, he will laugh, but to some degree. No. Oh God, no, not at all. But helping set up and take down the cage. Okay, so maybe it didn't help with that much. But like with the crew became kind of very tight, and it ended up becoming a real kind of team pitched effort.
Well, that's like me with the team at Rebellion Muay Thai. You were there from 10 a.m. till 3 a.m. doing all the setups that the crowd don't see.
It's actually, I have to be honest, I really missed a lot of the shooting I've done since Valor has been. I won't say more professional because it wasn't unprofessional with Valor, but like I said, I was part of a tight-knit crew and they were friends as much as they were. I mean, definitely, especially Philip McNally. Shout outs, Phil. Hope you're well if you're listening. Became a really, really good mate, as did the rest of the crew. I do miss that. The kind of everyone working towards a goal, the big release on fight night of all that energy, and then kind of everyone kind of hanging out afterwards and being like, wow, that was pretty crazy. Yeah. A lot of my shooting since then has more been paid to turn up in the night, shoot and go, which
there's the difference.
Yeah, but I do miss that element of crew. It was really enjoyable. And shout outs to Valor. I mean, if not for Valor, Joshua Stebbings Photography, or Dogs of War as it's now known, just wouldn't exist.
All right, let's move on to this next segment. It's going to be something different than I've done in the past. Which photo is yours?
Oh,
which photo is mine?
Interesting. I can tell immediately which one's mine.
Of course you can.
We have very different styles, which I like as well, actually, because I think if they were identical, I mean, that would be a bit boring.
Let's go with yours.
Yeah, I tell the top one was mine.
Tell me your style. How were you framing the shot? What was going through your mind? What do you think do you like the shot?
Okay, so
and also to add to another element, it's your mate getting hit in the head.
That's true. I mean, it might be overstating it to call him my mate. Certainly, I'm fond of Cal, and he was a great Valor champion. So he's definitely someone I'm emotionally invested in when he fights. But we don't get together for barbecues or anything. But shout outs to you, Cal. So basically, look, I think you may have a very different approach here, but in all honesty, for me, MMA is not, because it's so fast moving. It's not the sport where, it's not the shooting where and I do other shooting occasionally. So I do a bit of street photography and stuff like that. So, I do other shooting where you have much more time to think about your technical side of your shooting. Whereas when I'm shooting MMA, I already know pretty much after the first round of the first fight, I know what my settings are going to be. So I'm very rarely, obviously between rounds, you're going to lower your shutter and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Chimping. You've caught me chimping way too many times. So chimping, for anyone who doesn't know, is when you see a photographer looking at the back of their camera to see the shots. So basically, the fights themselves, I'm pick an ISO, a shutter, and an aperture, and that doesn't vary too much during the fights.
Because if they go the same lightings the whole night.
Yeah, pretty much. The only exceptions might be if they go to the ground and the lighting on the ground is different from the lighting when they're standing. You may sometimes lower your shutter when they go to the ground. You may not, but generally your settings are dialed in. So when I'm shooting the fight, the only thing I'm even remotely conscious of is framing. And so I'm not worried about being arty. My approach is always, I want to naturalistically, like without much effect, without too much post-production, I just want to capture the moment as it genuinely appeared. It's really important to me the colors are accurate, that the lighting is mostly accurate to what it was on the night. And I just want to do a faithful reproduction of that moment. How I see your style, and I'd be interested
Can I just jump in? Yeah, finish sentence.
I just say how I see your style, and I'd be interested, if you see it differently or not. I think you are much more artistic in your shooting, and especially maybe not in your shooting, but definitely in your post-production. I don't think you aim to be naturalistic to the same extent that I do, but far from being a bad thing. I think it is awesome. So if you compare our shooting side by side, I think I capture the moment quite accurately, whereas I would say Will kind of captures the spirit of the moment, and his shooting, and especially his post-production, what he does to the photos after he's finished with them, I think is much more artistic. It's much more liberal in usage than what I do. But I think both styles work. They both have their own kind of pluses and minuses, and I like that we have that bit of variance. How do you see your style in terms of how you shoot?
I was going to disagree with you when you said I did about the natural styles of my shot, but then you saved it with this. What did you say? Spiritual.
The spirit of the moment.
The spirits of the moment. Yeah, I actually really agree with that. In terms of the artistic points, in my opinion, anything that gets edited, even if it's cropped or made to black and white, it's been edited. So when I started, why not just bump up the contrast, bump up the colors just a little bit so that it stands out on social media? It's eye-catching. And that's because I sort of grew as Facebook really took off. So a lot of my shots were eye-catching on social media. So that was part of my strategy to make my photos pop a little bit. And I guess I do like to capture the spirit of the moment. Framing compositions, I think we have a very similar process with that. For example,
I think there's only so many ways you can frame, really, when it's a live fight.
In the last few years, my framing has changed completely, and we'll get to that in the later photos. Over here, for example, if it's going to be punches exchange, I like to frame it a bit tighter. I'd cut them from the legs up, because if it's boxing, majority of it's going to be hands, and you want to see the impact of the faces, just like your photos of Holly and Ronda. There's not a real need to show the feet. You're just sort of taking away from the impact of what's happening there. That's one of my rules that I go to.
I find even just with my co-shooter, Paul, me and him have a very different style. I shoot very tight and he shoots much looser, which is
perfect actually, if you have a second shooter.
Yeah, it's proved really effective, because it means I've often got the tight shot of the punch and he's got more of the setting. But yeah, I think, you're going to touch on it a bit later, but there's only so many ways you really can frame. You're loose or you're tight. And really that's it. I think where the photographer's individual style will come through is generally going to be the post-production.
Yeah.
And excuse me, my cat just decided to jump into my desk. I think you're a bit more daring than I am with your photos. I like a bit of restraint. I don't like my photos to get too far beyond the naturalistic. And sometimes you definitely chuck on a bit more contrast or clarity than I would.
It's because I'm gauging the feedback as I go along, and then I've been getting some positive feedback for the last years. And so I just say to myself, I'm going to keep pushing until I get some pushback.
Well, what I think is that, it's the better approach if you're shooting for non-photographers. I think a photographer, clarity is an interesting one for photography, because if you deal with people who do a lot of photography, if they see a lot of clarity, it can immediately, and I'm trying to think how to explain what clarity is for a layman's audience.
I don't even know.
Yeah, that's hard. It's an effect that makes everything kind of bold, a bit more bold. But when you start to add
sharpness and contrast to an extent.
Yeah, but when you start to add a bit too much of it, it can start to look like, I guess, a bit plasticky, or just not immediately real in some way. And so I tend to avoid that. You turn that dial up a bit more, but I absolutely think it works with the shooting you're doing. It's not by any means a criticism. And that's, as I've said again and again, why I really like having you as as an influence and someone who whose photos I follow that isn't me, to get an insight into a different approach. And I have to acknowledge there's techniques that I have taken from you. One bit of post-production I got from you that I really quite like, for example, is just, I don't, and one thing is I will never, ever, ever edit a shot of an actual fight, anything but completely naturalistic. I won't do a black and white. I'll do the cornering between rounds, telling the story of the promotion, the photos of the cage. They can all have the absolute whatever edited out of them, but I'll never do a photo of the fight itself non-naturalistic. I don't know why. That one of my big rules, but I love that we do approach post-production differently. I really like what you do, and sometimes there's a definite urge to replicate it. And to kind of finish what I was saying before, I think it is a good approach if it depends who's going to view the end product. For me, often wrongly, I'm always conscious of what other photographers are going to think of my product, and so I might hold a bit more restraint on certain things. But at the end of the day, when you're shooting an MMA promotion, what matters is what the fighters think, what the promotion thinks, and what the fans think. And I think,
to be honest, a lot of MMA fighters, if they see themselves throwing a punch or a kick, they'll like it. They'll edit up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And often, I mean, people don't see what we throw on the editing room floor. I'll have shots that, most people would see and go, wow, that is an absolute winner. Just go ahead, post it, you're done.
No,
like, no. Fighter 2 is ever so slightly out of focus. So you can I can tell. William can tell.
Oh, yeah. I'll let you know.
So you do sometimes, for example, Stephen Kennedy here, William, I think he's a bit out of focus there, mate. Pick your game up. No, but that's, like, genuinely, if people could see what gets left on the editing room floor, I think, it's hard to explain, but it's like we are very exacting on what we put out. And for me, for example, let's say this photo in front of us, let's say that, Callan wasn't in sharp focus. I probably wouldn't use that shot, even though 99% of people who would see it will go, yep, that's a cool shot. I want it to be a shot.
You're enforcing a level of quality control to make sure you're only outputting
exactly
something that's only been approved by yourself.
Mm.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about the artistic stuff, I think having my graphic design background, I know when it gets to the artistics, that's when I know I can sort of see the balance. If I'm going overboard, then that becomes like a art piece. I sort of have a mental idea of how deep to go. And going back to what you said about composition, I feel like we have a very similar composition style. And there was actually a few times when doing my homework for this interview, I actually used your photos and my photos, and then I look closely at the watermark. I'm going, oh shit, that's one of Josh's
Couldn't
shots.
tell.
No. All right.
Well, like I said, though, I mean, there are really only so many ways you can frame a fight. Like, I mean, you're not going to be, it's not the time to experiment with rule of thirds and all the kind of art technique. It's just not the time. You can do that between rounds.
That's fair. Which one's yours? Left or right?
Funnily enough, are
you thinking, Josh?
I didn't get a good shot of this. There
was a third one.
I
don't know if that was yours or Paul's, but it was a blurred one.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure mine's the one on although the left does kind of look like mine too. Hang on, I'm in the one in the left. Yeah, it's the one on the right. Dead giveaway there. So basically the reason why I knew that was mine, I didn't get a great shot of this moment. And this is a prime example of a shot I would actually probably, in brutal honesty, normally throw out. But when it's the only shot you get of that moment, you kind of just...
Sorry, what was your answer? Left or right?
Well, I'm in the one on the left. You can see my flash. So mine's the one on the right. But I would have known that anyway, just because if you look at Nick's face, it's not in focus. It's honestly an image I would normally throw out if it wasn't one of the only images I caught of that moment. So every now and then quality control has to battle with getting an accurate capture of a really important moment.
That's one of my rules too. If you have a fighter landing a winning shot or like a dramatic shot, their face has to be visible because that's the selling point. It doesn't matter if you're throwing a flying kick or a flying knee. If I can't see your face, it doesn't mean anything. Even harder when you have headgear on, and the person copying the damage, I want to see the full face copying the blow. So props to Ben for having his hands up, but in terms of a photo, I don't really like that. So the one I took was on the right, so you can see. I'll just show it here. That was actually taken by Paul.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know my angle of it. Yeah, my angle of it looked pretty similar to that, to be honest. Like just not the level of sharp you're necessarily after.
That's why I like shooting with you. I like shooting on either side because we both get contrasting views. So after it's all done, I like to go through your photos and think, what did I miss? And see how I've done things differently. But with my shot here, I wasn't really happy because I couldn't really see the impact on Ben's landing on Ben. Nick's face was kind of blurred out by the light, so I wasn't completely happy with the shot. With any,
I remember not being at all happy with my shot either. I'm trying to think if Paul was the second shooter that night or if it was Matt. But anyway, can we go back to the 2 just for a second? Yeah, see, now knowing mine is on the left, even still, that's in the valley. If it's the only shot I have of that moment, I'm going to deal with it. If not, it's probably not the one I would use. But and then this is actually something I wanted to touch on as well. I think people, when you're standing there with a camera that's quite large and is realistically worth a decent amount of money, people I think don't necessarily understand why you might not get a given shot. And I know that might sound ridiculously obvious, but I want to break it down because I have had people hit me up and say, "Oh, you didn't get the knockout. What's going on? You were there with your camera. It's your job. What happened?" It's like, we are dealing with...
Does that shit you when people say to you, "Did you get the knockout?" "Oh, you didn't get that."
Oh, well, I was like, did you get any good shots? It's like, fuck, I hope so.
Did you take any photos last night? Fuck, yeah, I did.
Well, the old joke that, is getting older every minute is, I left the lens cap on. But basically what people need to understand, like I didn't get the Ronda Rousey knockout, this is the best shot I got of that fight. Now I would have damn near traded my right arm to get a good shot of that moment because that shot would have went viral. As I think only 3 or 2 of the 18 photographers cage side, only 2 or 3 of them actually got that shot. So that gives you a really clear indication of what you're kind of playing with. You're dealing with thousandths of a second. Now, every now and then you'll see an absolute cracker shot from an MMA photographer where the punch is landing and you can actually see their face distort, the ripple of the shock going through their face. People don't understand that shot is literally 1 in 10,000. I can shoot maybe 2 or 3 shows and get one of those shots. And I average probably 6,000 to 10,000 shots.
I think people forget you have 2 fighters moving around the ring, moving around the cage. They won't be staying in one spot. And plus you have camera crews around you, have pillars around you have the referees around you. So many things can happen. And like you said, that's a 1 in 1,000 shot or 10,000 shot.
Yeah, it really is. That's always the shot I'm looking for. I want that ripple. I want people to look at it and go, "Fwah!" But genuinely, I might get one of those every 3 shows I shoot.
It is a very key shot for a lot of photographers starting out. Once you get that knockout blow, once you get that blur photo of the mouth guard flying out, you're like, I'm the man. But then when you keep getting it over and over again, it's like, okay, what now? And that's when you start playing around with composition, you start playing around with emotions in your photography.
Indeed. Well, I think you would agree. Like we always want to tell a story. Sure, like I said, I like to present a naturalistic photo of the moment without too much editing, affectation, or anything injected. But we are always trying to tell a story. And for me, I think that probably shines through more in my shots that aren't of the fight itself.
Backstage shots.
Well, I think one of my favorite things to shoot is actually cornering. You get some really, really dramatic shots. When the person's leaning in, passionately telling them to fight, and they're looking broken or confident or whatever it might be. The thing I really like and respect about your work is I think that storytelling is still really strongly there in the fight shot itself as well, which is really impressive. But yeah, you're always trying to tell a story of the whole event, and you're always trying to tell as many stories as you can. As I sort of touched on earlier, there's nothing worse than getting home, looking through your shots and just thinking, I've got all these really good shots of fighter A, and I don't have that many great shots of fighter B. So do understand if you are ever looking through one of our galleries and you're like, there's 5 shots of fighter A doing really well and only 3 shots of me doing well. Know that we agonized over it just as much as you now are. And that, it's always really important for us to capture both sides, to show everyone off. I mean, one of my worst experiences as a photographer is I just went and shot a local Australian Girls in Gi competition in Glen Waverley. And had a really good time. Got some good shots, some nice dramatic arm bars. I always love shooting arm bars. And there were just 1 or 2 people that over the course of shooting for 6 hours the whole day, I just didn't get. And so like, is the edits all done? Are there any of me? And
were you paid to be there, or were you just there?
No. And it was early. It was early on, probably 2014, 2013. So I'll give myself that slight excuse. And it's something I've made sure I get a lot better at since. I don't do as many of those events anymore. I'm more usually just a fight show nowadays. But you definitely get a rock solid understanding pretty quickly that you're there to show everyone off. And even if it's a fight where fighter A comes out, beats the absolute tar out of fighter B, and fighter B really doesn't get up to much, you still want some good shots of fighter B. Even if they're not combat shots, even if it's fighter B's walkout or them getting cornered.
I had the same process as you. If it's a very close fight, like a unanimous decision, I might have 5 shots of fighter A doing the attacks and 4 shots of fighter B doing the whatever, because you want that slight advantage. If it's a split the points decision, even closer. If it's a draw, there's going to be an even amount of both fighters. If it's knockout, I'll have the knockout shot of fighter A, but then more corner shots, more walkout shots of corner B to make it to even it out.
I'll never forget. I had the promoter actually approached me for a fight show I shot. Complaint didn't come to me, but got through to the promoter, where there was a fight that was really very, very one-sided. I dare say a drubbing. Now, even with my intent and desire to make everyone I can look good, I couldn't. I just couldn't. It just wasn't there. On the other fighter's side, he got sadly fairly handily beaten. And the promoter said, the fighter's mum's hit me up. She's really not happy that there are no good shots of the fight. And I'm like, man, I feel bad, blah, 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 blah. He's like, no, dude, I just told you, your son got thrashed. There were no good shots because he didn't do very well. So the promoter had my back, but you never want that. You always want to show off both sides as best you can.
That's awesome, man. I'm pretty happy to say in my last 10 years, I haven't had anyone complain about that kind of stuff before, because when I first started...
Only happened once.
Once? It's not too bad.
Yeah.
When I first started, I was looking at Terry Vaughan's photos for inspiration, and I saw someone comment on him because he does all the local kickboxing shows. Interstate complained saying, hey, there are no fighters of me. Well, that's because he got thrashed and he felt the whole state was against him because he was from somewhere else. And that drove into me. And I said to myself, I will never let that happen to me. I want to make sure I accurately depict the fights as it happened, and even for people that weren't there. And going back to what you said about storytelling, I think that just comes to me. It's a bit of a personality trait. I was giving an interview last week, talking about how I felt I'm a very introverted person, so I have a hard time being expressive, and I find myself being most expressive through my photos. So that's why storytelling really comes through in my work.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I don't know. I'm a mess of contradictions, but I certainly I wouldn't say my mouth is limited to my photos. Look, I've got to be honest. I'm I'm a little bit bipolar, and I tend to say what I think. But I find actually, because I am normally quite extroverted, I'm quite happy to be the center of attention. I'm quite happy to actively seek said attention. So I almost come at it from the exact opposite perspective that you do, but I actually really value my time behind the camera because I know it's a moment where I'm not the focus, where I'm not seeking attention. It's not about me. And if I was to make it about me in any way, then I would be incorrectly doing my job. Like my job as a photographer is to be firmly on the other side of the camera. I am never to be involved in events. I'm only to capture them. And that might sound very simple, but that is actually something that's really difficult when you, especially the guys I shoot in Tassie, there are people who I have shot every single fight they've done. I've developed a level of attachment to them in one way or another. And so sometimes when things happen, it is hard to be just completely and totally detached. But I know I'm there for a very specific reason, and it's to witness events, not to be part of them. And so I find that is a really nice balance to how I tend to operate in the rest of my life, where I am happy to be in front of the camera and in the center of attention. It's a good check on those urges of mine, shall we say.
Really well said, mate.
And I actually find it'll sound maybe a bit weird. I find this a really meditative quality when you are shooting, where you are just looking through. Okay, so when you look through a viewfinder, you've got on the side your light meter, your shutter, various readouts that tell you what your camera's doing. So there's this black space between you and where the image begins. And we're going to get into very, I don't know, Joe Rogan-esque territory here. But I find like I live in that black space just before the moment I'm shooting. And I really like just zoning out of the world, living in that black space and capturing the moment. I find there's something slightly meditative about that I really enjoy.
Okay, I can't really. Maybe what I'm feeling is different, but I don't know. It might be the same thing. I don't think that deep about that. But when I'm shooting, I like to be in I do like to be in my zone. I really get annoyed when I'm shooting a fight as it's happening and someone yanks my jumper to ask me something. I'm like, I've got to be in full focus. So I guess I'm in the Zen zone, and I don't like to be disturbed when I'm working. In between rounds, I'll be chatty, I'll be talkative, but when I'm shooting, I want to make sure I don't miss the shot, because you can miss a moment. So you're somewhat tense but zen at the same time.
Do you find that, like, I generally, obviously, I'm in my own little world, I don't have a lot to say, but very quietly, because again, it's not my role to be a part of events, it's only my role to witness events. But if I see, a particularly good thing happen, and often for me, it's a really nice transition in jiu-jitsu or a really nice submission, I tend to, don't get me wrong, I love all the arts, but in terms of what I've done myself since having an interest in MMA, it's definitely the grappling side. So often when I see a dude, transition to a slick armbar under my breath, I'll be like, nice. Do you find you kind of have just that little level of, or no, dead silent?
All the time as I'm shooting. If I'm seeing a jiu-jitsu match or a grappling match, as I'm shooting, okay, move that leg over. Okay, transition. All right, get the under leg, sweep the leg.
Nah, I like my little just commentary to myself. I will just I guess, give a story that highlights. So again, when you are shooting, you are there to witness the moment. You're not there to be a part of the moment. I have only ever once, sadly, crossed that line. And it's not a story I've told before, but I will. So basically, two guys I really like, Hoshi Friedrichs and Damon Upton-Greer. I've seen both of them fight quite a few times. They're both super nice guys. And Damon in particular, I absolutely love shooting this guy. For Victorians, you missed out. Hopefully he can do some fights in Melbourne, but he is beautiful to shoot. He throws crazy kicks. He does crazy stuff, and beautiful jiu-jitsu as well. So, he was on the first card I ever shot. I think, or maybe number 2. Either way, from the very, very early days, I've been shooting Damon. And him and Hoshi had a fight in, I think it was Devonport. Could have been Burnie. Pretty sure it was Devonport.
Mm.
And it got very, very bloody. Probably the bloodiest fight I've actually shot. And so basically, I can't remember if I was answering the bell for the 2nd or 3rd round. But Damon, by that point, had leaked several blood transfusions worth over the cage floor. And you could see in his corner that he was having a lot of difficulty answering the bell. Now, Hoshi's someone I've noticed when he gets, when he's in fight mode, he's very singularly focused.
Definitely.
Probably more so than any other fight athlete I've actually encountered. Hoshi in the ring is not Hoshi outside of the ring. Not a criticism, not a bad thing, just different. He gets super focused. And so, you know, Hoshi outside the ring, friendly, nice chap. In the ring, Hoshi is scarily focused. So this particular fight, Damon's obviously copped a lot. He's not in good nick. He's sitting in his corner, and basically Hoshi's kind of going, come on, get up, come on, fight. And I actually have GoPro footage of this fight. And Hoshi, if you wonder why I haven't sent you this footage, this is why. I'll send it to you now that you've seen this.
Did you get that GoPro footage idea, that GoPro idea from me, having it on your camera?
No, possibly. I don't know. But I did see that you did that. And you should keep with it. Do you still do that? Because it was pretty cool.
No, it behind a lot of work a lot of effort for little reward.
I can understand that. So basically, you know, this is in Damon, a guy that I've watched since I very first started, whose fights I really enjoy shooting and enjoy watching. And in that moment, I just had this like pang of sympathy for Damon. Like he's obviously like, just like leave him alone. And I said that. And at that time, I'm shooting on top of the cage. So I very much doubted anyone actually heard it. I'm like, leave him alone. And I was immediately like, Josh, shut up. Not your job. Just capture the moment. That is probably the only moment.
It wasn't that bad, but it was a point that you can look back to if you ever think about crossing the line again. It's like, okay, don't overstep my boundaries.
Like, I think the motivations were human and understandable, but it's definitely not something that I would do again. So now that you've seen that, Hoshi, I can send you the footage of that fight.
That's awesome, man. All right, back to our photos. Left or right? Which one's yours? Which one's mine?
I suspect the left is mine because of the color.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in either of them. Not in either of them, which makes it a bit more difficult this time. The right one, I think, has a bit more of your feeling, and the colors on the left look a bit. And I can see my watermark. I couldn't until now, but I can see my watermark in the bottom corner. But yeah,
I'm not playing fair. They're both yours. I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Why are the colors so different?
The one on the left and the one on your right was shot by your second shooter, whether it be Matt or Paul. I'm not sure, but I was in a very similar angle, in a very similar position to that one.
Damn, that's nice. I like that.
So for me, when it comes to submissions, I want to see both fighters in focus. I want to see the choke being applied. Seeing the referee is an extra bonus for me because, you know, at any second they're going to jump in and stop it. So
that's a really good capture. I really like that one.
Well, that's for me. That's storytelling.
You've really captured the struggle for the chin, because it looks like Callan's just ever so slightly maintaining his chin down, but it looks very nearly over. Good shot.
Cheers, man. Here's a cracker of a shot.
Getting
that knockout shot.
Oh, man, that guy got knocked out of his shoes. That was brutal. Shout out to Lucas, the Lycan. From my alleged gym not that anyone's turning up at the moment with COVID, but I am myself an absoluter, although anyone listening to this will say, you turn up to class like once every 6 months, which is true, but I do have an affection for the absolute guys. Obviously, as with any shooting, that affection...
Check out my absolute episode that just got dropped today.
With Simon Carson, I did
Yep.
see that. I'm happy to give that a listen. I do like Simon. He seems like a nice fella.
Well, these knockout
My
shots
mate,
is what you're after as a starting photographer, but you've been well established in the game. This was just another
look,
day.
yeah, look, if I'm honest, that's not a great knockout shot. I mean, it captures the moment, but ideally what I would love to see would be, apologies to the other fighter, I'm not sure of the name. I would love to see a bit more of his face actually copying the blow. But when it's the only capture you got of the knockout moment, that's not what I'm going to complain about either, but it's just
I
not
agree.
the ideal necessarily.
I'm pretty sure this was your one because I was in a very similar situation as you, and I have it from a slight different angle. And like I said, if the fighter's face isn't in focus and you can't see the impact landing, it's not a good shot. So in moments like that, I tend to chain my photos together to get that story across.
Now, yeah, I've seen you do that, and I honestly, that's something I should.
That's my reasoning for doing that, because if I missed a shot.
Well, it means you get the moment without necessarily getting the moment, and I've been a little bit leery of combining photos. I'm not sure why. Generally, hasn't felt natural to me to do that. Not that doing it is unnatural, just not natural to me. But it is a really good technique. What I like about it, I love like pointing, as if people can see what I'm pointing. But the second shot is the moment. So the second shot is the actual knockout, which is, I guess, analogous to the shot of mine you've just seen. But obviously, on its own, again,
there's nothing to it.
Well, I mean, it would still work. The fighter would still know it's a knockout shot. They could share it. Their friends go, yeah, it's the shot. All of
But
that
to
stuff.
us,
it still works. Exactly.
You'll critique me saying, well, what happened here? And I'll say the same to you.
What's the difference between the ideal and what you end up getting? And sometimes it has to be what you end up getting because you didn't get the ideal. But again, it is a photo of the moment. And at the end of the day, you can't be too unhappy with that shot either, because at the end of the day, it's where you are around the cage. I mean, it's not like, if I just very quickly sprinted 15 meters to the left, I possibly could have got. You generally are stuck in one place, and what you get is what you get. But I think this is a really good photo to show off what I was actually talking about earlier. I'm guessing that these, at least the first three, are all immediately consecutive to one another, correct?
Yes.
So here's a really good indication to anyone watching at home, the product we actually get. So between Lucas's hand being in the air and it landing, that's two immediate shots. Like bang, 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 bang. So like when you hold down your shutter, actually, hang on 1 second.
Here we go. Showing off the camera gear. Is that Daisy?
So when you hold down the shutter, you're going to hear like this. Okay. So that's what you get between those two shots. Like it's 12, like my camera's 12 shots a second. So you think, oh yeah, you'll easily capture the moment. But the difference between one exposure and the next is the entire distance from his fist being out to it actually hitting the face. So you can imagine if William's shot was, the first shot, for example, was his fist was higher, closer to its target, then the second shot would have completely missed the punch. So that's the microseconds that we're dealing with.
And the fans could get, why don't we just keep shooting like this every time? Well, there's about 10 or 15 fights per fight night, and you're doing 1,000 shots per fight. That's going to add up into the post-production. It's going to be unbearable, especially for a one-man show. I didn't realize there's an editing process and a filtering process and a curating process afterwards.
And actually, I think the filtering takes longer than the editing. Just picking your shots actually often takes longer than editing, because you're picking from such a big pool.
Yeah.
And I think this is the other thing in terms of making the case as to why you should pay me or William to shoot your fight show.
Because he gets the shot.
I mean, that obviously that goes without saying, William. But
that's a perfect overhand right too. He turns his knuckles as a striker, man. I love that. You're getting the punch with the right two knuckles. His shoulders over his body lands perfectly.
It really shut his lights out too, unsurprisingly. But in terms of making the case of why you pay Josh or William to shoot your show, the level of post-production that we do,
And the
I think
thought
a lot of
process.
people, yeah, I think a lot of people think, you do your shooting on fight night and then you're done. Typically a run of highlights for me, I do it over the course of the following week. If people have paid a premium, I might even get it all done for the next day. That's obviously subject to booking and negotiation at the time. But I mean, that post-production easily takes 5 times as long as the show itself did. And then, if anyone has orders or individual requests, then that's more time. And so we spend I spend way more time editing than I
I
ever do
think to be
shooting.
fair, let's say it will take most photographers a week and a few days. Let's say, 7 days. I've seen people have a turnaround of like 2 or 3 weeks. To me, that's too long. 3 weeks is too long.
Yeah, agreed. Well, you
Yeah.
need to capitalize on the energy of the event. If the
Yes.
energy of the event's gone, and I mean, this is for everyone. For you as a photographer, any attention on those shots is gone. For the promoter, any kind of buzz that they might be able to generate from sharing that shot, by that point, it's gone.
It's gone. There's shows every weekend. There's fights on, even these days. Exactly. It gets harder and harder.
Exactly.
It's not relevant anymore. So like I said, an average, a show takes about a week. When I first started, I was about 22 at the time. I had so much energy in me. I would do about, I think there was a period of 6 months, I was doing shows for free. I would drive across town for no money, take my shots, come back home, edit the whole show in one night, sleep at like 5 a.m. and then be back up the next morning to go to school. And I think me doing that back then helped get my name across, helped showcase my work quickly, because I knew I was competing against other people, not necessarily yourself, but the other guys ringside. And when they see my shots first, they've all taken in the moment. And then when the other guys' shots come out a week afterwards, they lost the moment because other shows have come up,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just as simple as I think the energy that follows a fight really only lasts a few days to a week. And
Yep.
if you don't capitalize and get product out in that time, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, but also the promotion as well.
Definitely.
And I mean, and the fighters, obviously they want to be able to, I mean, if you imagine it from a fighter's perspective, you've just had this sick knockout and you want to be able to share that as quick as you can. Like waiting a week and a half for that, it'd be pretty agonizing, I imagine.
I came home from an event one night at 12 a.m. I got a fighter. Hey, bro, did you get any photos of me fighting? I just got home.
Yeah, I've had that message a few times.
Corner
Ooh. Well, while we're here, shout outs to Elvis, legend of the scene, and also, and despite his fearsome, tough appearances in the cage, an absolute teddy bear to shoot with. Super nice guy.
I was
Shout out
thinking
to
of the
Elvis.
same word, teddy bear.
Yeah, no, it's super nice guy. Awesome to shoot with. Haven't done it in a fair while, but hopefully I will again someday. So is this guess who did what?
Yeah, let's do that.
Was black and white. So you don't do a lot of black and white, do you?
I do.
Okay.
There was a year when I did all my corner shots in black and white, and then I got over it. If I want to do black and white,
black and typically for me, cornering is generally one of the only shots I will do black and white. Certainly, as I've said, I'll never do the fight with that sort of effect on it. So yeah, I'm going to say the left is mine. I am going to say it's probably not one of my best shots ever.
you are correct. It's your shot. That was actually from the first photo of the series when you were actually inside the cage between rounds, crouching down, getting your shots.
I would edit that shot very differently now, I have to say. There's a few things looking at that I'm not a fan of, but that's a big part of it as well. You evolve and look at things differently over time, and that's kind of a cool part of the experience. I like that we've both captured that look of kind of quiet determination. You can tell there's a lot of fight left in those eyes.
There's a few things in my mind, coming from a fighter's perspective, for myself being there. You want to see that connection between the fighter and also the coach. If you've been in the game long enough, you know who's the main coach of each fighter and each team. Yep. So you want to make sure that they're prominent in the photo. You can sort of see Elvis's face in your photo, whereas I completely missed his head. But luckily enough, I managed to get his logo on his T-shirt, so
The Cinzic brush,
that still works. It's about building that, showing that connection, that bond, and also showing that team.
And as well, like some of the gym leaders are such absolute characters. Like I think Elvis definitely fits that bill in terms of is definitely a character of the sport.
Moving forward, this was a very special moment for you. I remember capturing this. You were a bit stressed out on this night, and I remember why, because you bastard, you got that UFC gig. So you were doing a test run with Paul.
That is a nice shot.
It can be
God, I've really gained some weight.
Oh, you look fine, mate. It's just the hair. But you guys were doing a test run of seeing how fast you can get each fight up.
Yes,
you were stressing out for the night too. So as I was shooting the fights, I kept looking over to see how you're going, because I wanted you to get the job done. And at the same time, I was still gunning for that UFC media pass.
Yeah, so look, one thing I think is important to touch on. So as we've repeatedly established, me and Will are to some degree competitors, though I've never really seen it like that for various reasons. He's a little bit better than me. But basically, we've always been competitors, but there's never been any kind of ill will. So, hey,
Will.
It's also your name. So basically, for example, I think, when both of us always kind of wanted to shoot UFC. And I mean, that I'd be lying if I didn't say that was the entire aim. I mean, that's why I started, in the hopes that one day I would do that. And there's never any sense that that was an opportunity either of us wanted to deny the other. I think there was a level of wanting to get there first, but I never got the sense from William that, there was any resentment that I got that nod. And then later when he got to shoot a UFC card, I was nothing but happy for him.
I was being very transparent with what happened leading up towards.
Yeah, that's a whole other story, which I mean, I won't get into. Stuff happened, and there's definitely no hard feelings around it. But I was really happy that you were shooting a UFC show. And I think it may never happen, but one of my dreams would actually be for us both to be on the same UFC card. I think we would both love that. I mean, even the UFCs we have done where we were both at weigh-ins shooting were awesome. So, I mean, hopefully that happens one day. And I do have to emphasize that it's never been about competing with Will for me. And generally any success he's had is something that I've greeted with nothing but happiness, and I've always kind of felt the same in kind from him. But in terms of the story of the night, we had shout outs to Dan Herbertson from Absolute MMA. He gave me a few email addresses. He had himself shot various combat sports professionally in Japan. And so he had a couple of contacts, and basically when I knew UFC was coming to town, I just sent out emails hoping. And
it's a very smart method.
I sent out 4 or 5.
My method was I went with a now defunct publication, which I ate shit for about close to a year because the person I was dealing with was so condescending. I'm sure you know who that person was. Kept leading me on, and then at the last minute I didn't get the gig. So I went down that path.
So we'll pause that for 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
at
basically,
at the last week, he was like, "Oh, I've only got one media pass, and I kind of want to meet myself. So that's why you can't go."
Yeah,
not relevant. It's not relevant anymore.
Well, along the same token, I when I was a young and vulnerable photographer, I had the publication who that person worked for approached me for shots. And I told him, yep, this is the cost. And one half of the Valve promotion actually was like, no, you're not going to charge him for shots. If you do, we'll just use someone else. So you end up in some pretty brutal situations sometimes. That wasn't Phil, so people can work out who that was. Phil's awesome. I just want to be clear about that. But yeah, so basically I sent out emails to 5 or 6 different media orgs. By and large, I didn't really get any response. Then there was, I figured, I'm not going to get a response. Was basically done with the whole affair. A little bit disappointed, but, ready to pack my bag and move on. And then I got an email from ESPN, which, looking back on it, is freaking insane. Of all publications for it to be, ESPN's pretty crazy. And got into, build up a contact there. Just one sec. I just want to make sure I get his name right. Is it Potterton or Potterson? Hang on.
He gave you a big break. You can
Yeah,
just
so I should probably remember his name. Hang on. Jason Potterson. Jason Potter? I think it's Jason Potter. Oh, Facebook, you're not helping me. I know, hang on. I'll start this bit again once I've got his fucking name.
We've only got a few more.
Cool. So photography. What is this? I'm just going to go with Jason. Anyway, so so basically, finally, well after I thought I wasn't going to get a response, I got a response from ESPN, which was even now an absolute blowout in terms of all the people I could shoot for, that it would be such a big org. So basically, I got into contact with Jason from ESPN, and he talked me through how the show would go, what was expected. And it was really different for me because obviously everything I'd done to date, I'd go home, edit it, send through the photos over a period of time. Whereas when you're shooting for ESPN, they need it right then and there. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. Get it done, get it through to me. Don't even worry about post-production. We'll do that. Just send it through. And so basically, thanks heaps to Charles Fernandez and Trent James, they allowed me to do a dry run on one of their Hex shows so I could show Jason, how I could kind of fulfill my brief. And so me and Paul was my kind of uploader. I'd quickly run over to him with my memory card. He'd get all the shots, pick 5 or 6 good ones and upload them. So this is the fight night we actually did a dry run of that on. And the product from this was how I was able to kind of say to Jason, look, I can do it. And then we kind of went on from there.
Nice one. I remember when I did the UFC event, I wasn't sure how much time I had between fights, and I was thinking about how you and Paul just rushed back and forth. I don't, maybe the time has changed 5 years on from that event, but we had a nice media desk. I could easily run back and just quickly upload fights before I walked out. My only issue was I had an older MacBooks. I had no charger, so I was closing my MacBook every time so that it wouldn't die on me. It was
my MacBook's nearing the end of its lifespan, so I know them feelings.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience. All our years in those smaller shows led up to the big events.
Well, there's a really, common meme. I dare say me and you. I know I've shared it. I think you've shared it.
Is it the one, if you haven't worked here, don't expect to work there?
No, what are you talking about? Yes, no, I do mean that one.
Yeah.
There's like, and it's, it's directed at fighters, and it's basically a photo of an indoor gym kind of environment with a cage set up in the middle. It says, like, if you haven't, practiced in this environment or whatever, then don't expect to get to this environment. And then the other frame is UFC. And I think same is true of photographers. We don't get punched as much, thankfully, but it is a proving ground, so to speak. I don't know.
Speaking about how we're somewhat competing, but not really at the same time, I was so bummed out when I couldn't get that UFC gig the first time around, UFC 193, Ronda and Holly. But at the same time, I was so stoked that you got it, and I was following your shots as you went on. And when you wanted to kill a shot, that elbow landing perfectly, to me, that was a result of all your hard work from all those years. And I think I shared that picture too. I'm like, man, my boy's doing great stuff out there.
I think there's something that, we have every reason not to dislike each other, but I guess to be a lot more competitive and a lot more ruthless with each other.
From the outside, yes.
But we just never have. And I've always enjoyed that dynamic. And so there will never be a point you reach that I will resent. Anything that comes your way, I'm always going to be happy for you. And I know it's the same in return. And so I think it's good to have, someone that is nominally a competitor, but all they really do is just push you to be better. There's no kind of negativity. Oh, not friggin' William again. I'm sick of his crap or anything like that. And any opportunity the other gets, it's only love. So I appreciate that dynamic.
No, that's cool, man. I want to use this example to talk about some compositions. I'm going to use yours as a breakdown. As much as I love your shot here, I think it's perfect for a canvas, perfect for prints, perfect for headlines and front covers. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit jaded now because I've had so many, I'm sure you have too, so many people ripped off your photos and use it for profiles and crop off your things. These days, if I was to take that shot, I would try and frame it a bit more tighter, because if someone was to crop that, they'll just do that. Your water
absolutely,
and it's completely gone. I'll give you this.
I haven't.
Oh yeah, keep going.
Whoa, go back to that. That was crazy.
You go.
No, I was just going to say, I actually, I haven't touched this photo much, well, at all really, since it was originally shot. And as I put it up today, especially when you're talking about framing, I was thinking, I'll definitely make that tighter now. But I mean, that's all part of it. The stuff you learn along the way. I appreciate that it's always. I relate it to BJJ in a lot of ways. I think that, for example, with BJJ, you never go, okay, I've made it. I'm now the consummate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete. I can do all the things. I'm done. There's no more to learn. I always say it's the same with photography. I mean, with BJJ, there's always going to be some guy who has a game that you're not familiar with. There's always going to be more that you can learn, more that you can develop. And I see photography exactly the same way. It's a constant journey. It's a constant evolution.
You have to adapt. Briefly talking about composition, this was taken in 2014, so my 4th or 5th year into the sports. I like this because it shows good technique, it shows airborne, it shows someone in the air, it shows a technique landing, it shows a sweat, it's all there. You can see the ring. But if this picture was going to be used on Facebook, I can guarantee 100% someone would crop it.
And I mean, sometimes the Facebook crop isn't such an issue, but when you have professional publications cropping your shot and using them, like I had a couple of, I'm trying to think how to put this, international media orgs actually use shots of mine, not credit me. And it wasn't until I actually approached them and said, hey guys, this is not cool, that they actually acknowledged, apologized, and added a credit. And I mean, the funny thing is, I hope it comes across somewhat in this discussion, we're pretty chill people. If people approach us and say, hey, I'd like to use a shot of yours, we're usually going to be able to come to some form of terms that will be, that will make both sides happy. We probably won't charge you the earth. So there's a happy medium to be found there, relatively easy, where it works for everyone. But often, sometimes that's not what happens. You're just reading an article on a website and you go, oh, crap. Looks like my shot.
And you can tell, even when I had those little testers, you knew your shots.
Well, the funny thing is, though, you say that, but it does remind me of a time when, shout outs to Mike from Fight News Australia. He's always kind of had my back when it comes to other people using my shots. So there were a few times where he'd be like, oh, hey man, this guy's used a shot of yours. And I would hit them up and be like, oh, not meant to do this, put in a credit, etc. And there was this one time where it was from a UFC fight night. And basically, I've looked at it and I'm like, yeah, they've used my shot. And I was like this far away from sending the scathing email, because when you do steal my photos,
you open all these doors.
Yeah, I am. Again, as Will was saying, we still want to be professional. We still want to be nice. But at the point you've stolen my photos, you've done something wrong. And if you're like a high level media org, you've done something wrong. So I'm not going to be rude, but I may not be at my most congenial either. And man, it's just, people should know better, especially when you're an international or national media org. It's not cricket.
There's a difference. There's a difference when those massive organizations deliberately steal your photos, rip off your watermarks. There's that. And there's also your mum and dad who don't know any better. They just show their kid.
And I've always, I hear, honestly, sometimes I actually get annoyed with photographers complaining about this issue, because you do have to understand that plenty of people are going to do it really innocently. They're
It
not
comes
going to
down
mean
to the
any.
intention.
Yep, they're not going to have any harm, any desire to do you harm. There's not going to be any malice. They just don't know. And look, and generally, if it's just a shot on Facebook, I mean, the degree, and this has changed since when I first shot. It's kind of like that, how you stop being competitive with other photographers. You stop chasing every single time your shot gets used, or I do, because you just get to a point where it's like, if it's a media org doing it, they know better. It's not good enough. Fair enough. But if, mum's like reposted the image and cut off the watermark, I'm not going to lose too much energy over that. She didn't mean it. She doesn't know any better. Not everyone is across intellectual property rights and how it works in photography. So I always do try and really weigh who has done it in terms of how I actually respond, if I respond or react.
Yeah. I think as a photographer, you might appreciate the space in this photo, but if I was to...
Oh, man, to tell you what I love straight off the bat.
Go ahead.
One of the biggest things in combat sports, if you get it, it's always a winning shot. And that is these, once again, 1 in 10,000 or maybe 1 in 5,000, the sweat droplets. It's always a winning shot if you get the sweat droplets.
Well, here's a quick tip. If someone's fighting in the second or third round, oftentimes they're being lathered up with water. So any first punches that land, it's going to go flying. But I was saying, if I was to recrop this today, I'd make it a bit more tighter in case someone does crop it and tries to rip me off. That's when I'll lose a lot of the spatial parts of the
How do you sit on aspect ratio when we're probably this might just be me and you chat, but when I first started, I would crop in any which way and I would never maintain aspect ratio. So
90% of my photos, it's all horizontal. I rarely do vertical unless it's portraits. But
do you break aspect ratio? Would you just do a random ass crop, in other words?
No, it's always, it's always just, I don't know, whatever you call it, 6x4 or whatever the default setting is.
Because honestly, I actually feel a bit bound by it now, which is annoying. But I used to just crop any which way. So you'd have completely irregular size photos that don't fit onto.
Well, you've got to think about how it's going to be used on screens.
Yeah, exactly.
These days on social, so you can afford to use a square crop. But back then,
I don't fuck with aspect ratio too much. I did a lot earlier, and honestly, I miss not feeling bound by that. But anyway, that's really only on me.
Hey, with the watermark thing, man, you know as well as I know, people want to steal your photos. They'll steal it anyway. You can start leveling up your photos with all these crazy watermarks, but
that's a difference in philosophy. You see, I've seen some photographers that they will do an opaque watermark that covers the whole photo. And if you go to my actual website to purchase photos, I have that there.
I do the same thing.
As a bit of protection.
If you're sharing it, what are you sharing really? Do you want to share it so that no one can take it, or do you still want people to appreciate it to an extent?
And that's the constant battle. It's like if I'm doing a highlight gallery, I don't want to ruin my shot by having an opaque watermark over it. And if the price of that is that some nefarious or innocently ignorant actors end up removing that watermark, it's a better compromise than doing something that I feel will actually sort of ruin the shot. And the thing is as well, you don't want to be seen as like, if I show you a shot that's like, let's say this shot, for example, you did this. I look at that and I start to go, is that about William's ego? Because all I'm seeing in this photo is William Liu everywhere.
Hey, Josh, it goes back to what you said about being cage side. You don't want to overstep your boundaries. You're not.
Exactly.
So the show's not about you. That's when the size of your watermarks plays a big deal, especially some photographers when they have the promotion watermark and also your watermark. Some of them make their watermark slightly bigger, and that just becomes about them.
Are you working
for a show or working for yourself?
Yeah, exactly. That's getting weird at that point. But yeah, so I think, me and you have a similar philosophy in that regard. We want to show off the moment. We do want to appropriately signify it's our shot, but secondary to showing off that moment, knowing that unfortunately that will mean every now and then it's going to get cropped off. But like you say, when you do, like for example, with this shot, if it had been released like that, it's really hard to crop it without losing the working parts of the image. Like to get rid of that watermark, you basically need to get rid of his bottom foot.
And you won't know that he's airborne.
Exactly. You start really losing the meaning of the photo if you do that.
Yeah. So that's how sad to say, but a lot of my photos these days, it's framed that way, in a similar way, where if
framed
you were to
like that when you shoot it, or just in post?
In post. When I'm shooting it like this, but when I'm posting,
of course,
it's going to be like that.
Yeah.
That brings us to our last photo. Everyone's favorite, the mastermind.
Yeah, that's the one we talked about earlier.
That's the one. I might use this moment just to ask you a few random questions, and you can go off in any tangent that you'd like.
I may indeed ask you some myself. Actually, can we pause just 1 second first? Sorry.
Yeah.
I am addicted to this mobile crack game, and I have my payout in a few minutes. I'm just going to very quickly do a battle. Sorry, it'll only take me 2-3 minutes.
Okay.
Fucking nerds.
I think you've answered most of my questions. So
I've only. Are you going to let me go, officer?
What
hang on. Like, Star Wars: Galaxy of Heroes.
Oh.
Which is, I mean, it's the worst game, man. You know those games like where it's just pay to play.
How much have you dropped playing a game?
Oh, I don't. I'm free to play, but it just means I'm a little bit less competitive. But it's just, and it's made by EA, and it's just the epitome of everything that's bad about modern gaming. But I'm so friggin' addicted to it. It does get a decent Twitch views though, which is good.
Oh, that's right. You're a Twitcher.
Allegedly. Come on, guy, die.
I might use this moment to share the story about, I don't know if I'll put this in or not, but I was shooting in a state one time, and I was scouted by this promoter who has been eyeing me for years. He wanted me to have me shoot at his show. So he was paying for me to be there. He was paying for my accommodations, paying for my flights. I mean, that's a pretty sweet deal. He had another photographer working there who was doing it for free or for nothing at the time. Oh. And when I was there, that person got the wrong impression, and I didn't want to tell that other photographer that I'm actually paid to be here. So I was playing it cool, and that person came straight to me saying, actually before this, I spoke to the promoter saying that, is the other person okay? And they're like, oh yeah, it should be fine. Rocked up there, did my hellos, and straight off the bat, I don't like you. You can't be in the ring. If you start taking photos ringside, I'm going to blast you on Facebook.
This is the other photographer, yeah?
Yep, I'm going to blast you on Facebook. I'm going to tell them what a snitch you are. You cannot shoot ringside. Half an hour later, we came to a happy medium, and I said, I'm going to shoot ringside, but I won't post them. I'm going to give it to the promoter, and he can do what he wants with them. I'm still being paid by the promoter, so I can't not do my job. After the first fight, I said to myself, well, I've got to do my thing. I went ringside to get the winner shot. That person stood in front of me saying, you cannot be here. Get out right now. Get out. And I was quite taken back because I've never had that experience before. No matter
you go on, sorry.
No matter what I said, that person was not having any of it, just kept calling me a liar. And I think the beautiful thing about that night was halfway through the night, that person's camera stopped working, and it became shit.
But oh man, I have to say, I feel for that dude too. I think there at times me and you have probably been that guy as well. We've probably handled it very differently when we've been that guy, but I think we've probably both been that guy in terms of like more when we were starting out than say now, but when you get the feeling that you're being treated very differently to someone else, and you're kind of pondering how fair exactly that is. And I think the difference is me and you would be nice about it, but we might internally feel like, what's going on? Like, I've put in X amount of fight shows for this guy. I've been loyal. I've turned up, haven't got paid. All of a sudden there's this other guy, and he's just walked in like he's running the place.
At that stage, your problem's with the promoter. It's not with the other person. They're just there to do a job.
Exactly. But I wouldn't be able to help feeling pretty bad as the photographer in that situation.
It wasn't just that. It was the pettiness of that person, because I had done the weigh-ins previously. They actually went on and I posted the weigh-in photos onto that promotion page. They went into that promotion page, deleted all of my photos off the page saying, no, you're not doing that. And I'm trying to think
Jeez.
the way of going about that. It's horrible. But anyway,
Well, I mean, I think
yeah.
the thing is, me and you, I think, and I don't want to be cognizant of what that guy was going through. I would never respond like that. And ironically enough, I think, I mean, me and you have a situation where it was a very clear right off the bat. Simple misunderstanding. So I had been shooting UFC for Fight News Australia. There was a bit of a change in hands in who was organising it, and William got put forward to shoot a UFC. Now, I was overjoyed for William personally, but I was pretty peeved at the publication until it's not now. It definitely has been discussed and everything since. It was an innocent mistake, but I mean, you can understand. And again, I wouldn't have handled it in the way that guy did. And I think that guy handling it like that does telegraph a level of pettiness, because his issue is with the promoter. It's not with you. Same as my issue, which is a non-issue now, was with Fight News Australia, not with you. So I was just entirely happy for the opportunity you had. And any other difficulties were between me and other parties. So I think me and you have always been very good at separating that. But I do think it's fair to say we can probably understand the emotions behind it, even if we would react differently, if you know what I mean.
To an extent, I'd agree.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because, look, basically, I guess the simplest way that I can put it is that I was going to say we're not dickheads, but I'll say to the extent that we are or aren't dickheads, we're not dickheads in that respect.
I could have handled that situation completely differently. I could have said, I was paid to be here. I'm going to shoot ringside. You can blast me on social media because I knew I wasn't in the right, but I just chose to take it back.
Mirroring the same kind of shittiness you're receiving.
Would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So look, at the end of the day, like regardless of what we do, we're all people. Be good to one another wherever you can.
Hey, if only it was that easy to practice for most people.
It's frequently not. And frequently people make it much harder, but that's life.
Let's move on to the last questions of the interview.
This is the fast money round. I'll get my buzzer.
Are there any advice that you wish you knew when starting out?
Don't do it. No. Oh man, there's so much stuff. I mean, a lot of it would be technical advice. Would be around like things that might not necessarily relate to everyone watching. I guess outside of the technical, shoot with these settings, edit this way.
That's how you find your own. That's how you find your own groove. That's how you find your own style too. So it's part of the whole learning process. And like I said earlier,
Totally.
That's why I like to be that friendly face that shows when I see new people. I'll just introduce myself so they have someone to work with at the start. In case I'm thinking back about me and you back then, if we had someone like that starting out.
Definitely would have. I mean, imagine if even if Elvis had started a few years earlier and we were getting like, I guess, a level of mentorship under someone like that, it would have been a very different story.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one. I definitely, I'm not someone who is really about regrets at all. I think regrets are fundamentally useless. You learn from the situation, you do better next time, and at that point, regret has no use. So there's nothing I think I would change. I think I might have tempered my expectations a bit more in terms of where, I mean, the journey is not over, who knows, but in terms of where this would end up, I think you enter into doing something like this with a dream of shooting the UFC, and you think that when you do, everything will have changed and you will have made it, but that's not at all how it works. You definitely have something additional on the resume that looks really good and that helps. But as with achieving any dream, it's just the start of the next journey. It's never the end.
Keep going.
Yeah. So I think I would have tempered my expectations, kind of say, look, there'll be good moments, there'll be bad moments, keep at it, but probably don't expect to be a household name by 2020, maybe. Other than that, I think that it would have been, I guess, good at certain points to tell myself that you will get where you want to get. That probably would have helped in some of the, dare I say, darker moments. But other than that, it would just be technical advice. Shoot with these settings. Pretty boring stuff, to be honest.
I guess what you answered with that sort of touched on my next question. Something that you had believed, that thing that you believed in early on in your career that you later changed. For me, it was when I started out, I wanted to be at every single event, every show, but it's not possible being that one-man show. You learn to sometimes let go and just take a step back. You can't please everybody. You can't be at two places at the same time. Sometimes you just gotta accept that. Sometimes if I can't get that UFC gig, shit happens. Someone I like yourself will take it. But you just learn to take the pressure off.
Yeah, I think very similar actually. You start out kind of wanting to shoot everything, and there are various motivators in terms of a big one is you just like what you're shooting. You like watching BJJ or you like watching MMA. So you want to be able to sit cage side or wherever it is and shoot is something you want to do. Almost without caveat, every time you're going to be there. To be honest, now that is the last thing I want. I really value, I guess, I'm trying to think how to put this. Doing fewer shows, getting properly paid for them, and then having downtime. I don't need to. And this is a big part of this is the process of actually getting your name out there, because at first you have no choice. You shoot every show because you want every show to know your name, and you want every fighter on every show to know your name in terms of being a name that reliably does good photography that you want to hire. Once you've kind of built a resume where you don't need to really prove anything to anyone anymore, the last thing you want is to be shooting every single show that happens. I mean, if for no other reason than you don't have a life at that point. Like each show, as we said, can have a week's post-production. If you're shooting every show every weekend when COVID's not happening, you can start to hate life, to be brutally honest. It gets a lot. So I'm at a point where I'm happy to collect what I think is an appropriate fee and really work that show well, and then take a bit of a rest till the next one. I would also, and you can cut this out if you want. Yeah. And you probably will. That's fine.
This is going for too long. I won't know when to cut and what to cut, but
that's all good. That's all good. If you just want to let you know that no, you'll cut this for sure. But if you want to pay me and William, we know, we talk, and
oh yeah,
we're not going to dog each other like that. Like, if someone says to me, I'm not going to try and undercut Will. If I, accept shooting a show I would normally shoot and do it, I am hurting the profession of photography. So it's not about the fact that I've then got that gig, my prestige is bigger, my name's bigger. A consequence of that is that I've devalued the craft of photography. So I can't then, Will can't ask, because I have set the value at 300. So a big
we actually talk to a lot of other photographers too. I actually talk to photographers in Queensland, New South Wales, WA. I know what they're making. I know what they're talking. I know what promoters are saying. Yep. So we talk. We know the value that we bring to shows, and we know when someone's lowballing us.
Yeah, and so that is, I want to emphasize something that we do have a level of communication around. And it's not just some kind of like schoolyard gossip of this guy pays this much. It's the fact that we don't want to devalue our craft, and we don't want to make each other's lives difficult. So I don't want to get paid a low ball amount for what is a high ball amount of work. So I will put my price out there. And if that means they want to go with someone who is not as experienced or is cutting their teeth, and seriously, good luck to that person, because I was that person. It's not about screw the guy with the crop sensor, get out of the way, you're inconvenient, you're ruining it for us guys that have made it. No, I was that guy. I want that guy to be successful as well. But at the point where I'm at, I don't want to devalue my craft, and I don't want to screw other photographers over. So generally when it comes to fees, we have a fair idea what each other gets paid. We communicate around that. And as said, not about schoolyard gossip. It's just about not devaluing the craft that we love.
It'd be a very lonely sport too, you know, by yourself in the editing room, getting messages from fighters asking for photos, getting messages from promoters trying to lowball you. And I feel like having that network, our support group, us talking online, just sharing stories, sharing moments, you soon realize everyone has the same moments and you kind of feel like you have a support base.
Yeah. And like also you compare war stories, and like I think with anyone who's involved in fight shows, I don't think it matters whether you're a photographer or not, you deal with some real characters, good and bad. You deal with some absolute craziness. I mean, when you're dealing with people who feel driven to stand in a cage and punch each other, and that's no knock on fighters. Most of the fighters I've met have been anything but meatheads. Most of the fighters I've met and talked to are quite cerebral. They're quite tactical. So it's not any slight on fighters. It's just an extreme thing to do.
Yeah.
And so you deal with a lot of interesting and extreme people. And so sometimes to be able to just compare war stories with someone and be like, oh, I'm not completely insane. This is just an interesting thing to do is definitely helpful in maintaining one's sanity.
I think that's all the questions I have for you, Josh. Did you want to ask me anything before we wrap up this interview?
How did you get into combat sports initially? You definitely seem more Muay Thai, is that right? Based in terms of, was that kind of your start? You got into watching Muay Thai first, or what was your start in combat sports?
I like traditional martial arts. Started martial arts at 17, doing taekwondo stuff. Got into mixed martial art. No, got into Thai boxing. It's just called Thai boxing. I think it's easier for both of us to say Thai boxing than Muay. Did that on a casual basis, eventually found mixed martial arts and was actually getting deep into it because as an introverted teenager, I wanted some direction. I wanted to get some confidence. So that's why I did martial arts. So I was learning about martial arts, learning about myself, growing as a teen, growing as a young adult, training quite a lot as well. So I was balancing that with university. Got to a point when I got injured from training, couldn't walk. My dad had his DSLR camera laying around. I had no time to pick it up, but since I couldn't walk for a week, picked it up, began playing around, and I learned how to shoot as I was at the gym. And because I couldn't train, I was still a student of the sport, so I took my camera into the gym and I learned my craft through the sport itself. So I was at a stage where I was still competing, training martial arts, and learning photography at the same time. So I learned photography through combat sports, and that's how I kind of got embedded into the sport. So as I guess my network of martial arts grew, my skill sets grew as well. So it kind of went hand in hand. So I don't really shoot these days. I don't really shoot anything other than combat sports. Occasionally I do some product photography, but I had the most fun ringside. I feel most calm at ringside or even at gyms.
There is, I'd kind of echo that as well. There is, as I was kind of saying about that meditative quality earlier, there is something very calming about sitting back and shooting a fight show. And I mean, it's a contradiction because at the same time it's not. It's intense. It's nerve-wracking. But we do it because I've always said, and it's corny, but do what you love and love what you do. And that definitely applies to my shooting. Like every now and then I'll, and this is always like initially when like I'm waiting for things to get started. I'm not feeling it. I don't want to be there. Always, without fail, once that first fight starts, even if it's not a particularly great fight, I'm like, I love this. I want to be here. This is what I love doing.
Now, what you just said, you need that same level of excitement and enthusiasm and energy from the first fight to the very last fight. And that's your job being ringside.
Well, I think that's something that's really interesting from our perspective. If you are MMA media, your interest is often towards the northern end of the card.
Mm.
And I just don't think that's the same for photographers. For at least event photographers, maybe media photographers is another story. And the reason for that, we're shooting for so many different stakeholders. We're shooting for the promoter. We're shooting for the fighter's mum. We're shooting, all of those different people. So for us, for me at least, there is no difference between how I shoot the main event and the first fight of the prelims.
Not at all.
They're both of equally important to me. I might go slightly hard on the shutter on the main event because I know that I don't need to conserve hard drive space. The fight is
but in terms of the shots that you capture, the walkout, the moment, the round,
or in terms of just the amount you care, or the amount you're invested. I'm always equally invested in the prelims as I am the main event. Sure, when it's guys you know well, or it's a particularly exciting main event, not going to deny the excitement does build, but it's never like, let's get through the snoozy prelims and get to the real stuff. And I think when you have that attitude, you start actually really appreciating maybe a lot more fights than you might otherwise. You start getting invested in fights on the prelims a bit more, that might not necessarily carry through if you were just sitting at home and watching as a fan.
I think because we both started at the grassroots and eventually made our way to the top pro shows, you can actually see a lot of these guys starting from having the very first fights until the very last fights or headlining fights. You can see the progression, you can see the growth, and you're invested in every fight that you shoot because these guys could actually make it big. And it's a big moment for them. It's a big moment for them too. I remember shooting some grassroots fights. I was pretty seasoned. I was very chilled, but I was still having a very professional workflow. But even though I wasn't nervous shooting, I could see people, the fighters, they were being very twitchy or having these butterflies. And that kind of hit me hard because that reminded me of me when I was fighting at grassroots level. So I know that feeling. So I still try and stay very in tune to what they're feeling. And that's what I try and capture myself in my shots.
What additional insights do you feel you have by virtue of having done some fighting yourself?
I think my network of gyms and fighters that I currently work with, it's been pretty strong. Because before COVID hit, I was still teaching martial arts part-time, and just doing that keeps me in tune with what's going on, keeps me in tune with people's developments, and just keeps me in tune with fight sports in general.
To be clear, like in terms of training levels, we might give each other a decent go if we competed over photos, but I dare say if you put me and Willie Lou in the cage, I'm probably going to get knocked out in pretty quick order.
I'll give you a fun fact. Did you know that I had the first Teepee submission in maybe Australia?
Teepee?
Teepee,
hang on, we've got to guess. 1 second, sorry. Had to be done. Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. In what?
Not many people knew that.
AMI fight? Yeah, or
semi-pro? It was out in the country back then. It was before the cage, 2010.
Crazy.
And that was when I didn't want to get hit in the face, so I focused on my submission game. Won my fights.
Understandably so.
Yeah, I want to keep my face intact. Built my submission game, got a few wins by submissions, and then got some injuries, which pushed me more into the striking aspect, which pushed me more towards Muay Thai.
Do you ever corner people?
On an AMI level, nothing pro.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yourself?
Oh, one thing I just fuck no. No, that probably wouldn't be a good idea. I'd get someone killed. Do want to include, I don't care where you put this, but there are some people that I have dealt with throughout this, and if I don't give them a shout out, I will absolutely hate myself. Paul Woolcock, my co-shooter. We shot UFC together, baby. Love that guy. He's my best mate and could not ask for a better co-shooter. We do it together because we both love mixed martial arts. And we came into the sport together in terms of watching it and becoming interested in UFC. So to be able to then shoot it with him. So the journey kind of continued, was awesome. Also, possibly my biggest influence, other than William and Esther Lynn, shout outs to Fiona Gumboots Walsh, for a few different things. Love her shooting. I think, like you, she tends to probably be a bit more artistic in approach than me. So often I'll look at her work and I find it kind of, as with yours, inspiring to branch out and be a bit more artistic with things. And also, I've shot so many fight shows beside her, nearly every fight show in Tassie for a good 3 or 4 years. I shot together with her. Absolutely lovely person. Can't say enough good stuff about her. She's currently not shooting shows at the moment, which is unfortunate, but awesome person.
I've been following her for years. I'd love to meet her one day.
Oh man, she is awesome. I love Fiona. Got all the time in the world for Fiona. And it's not just shooting. I mean, she's when I've shot in Hobart, I've stayed at a house and stuff like that. So very hospitable, awesome shots, really awesome, friendly, lovely person. Who else was I going to mention? Oh, also Win. I think that it's an interesting, I draw a bit of a parallel between you and Win, and the reason being that you both have that graphic design experience, and I think it really obviously informs the way you both shoot and how you edit your photos. So here's another person that he does really, really good fight show posters, and it's a fine art. There are some pretty bad ones, but Win does a really good job, and I also love how he brings that graphic design sensibility to the photos he does as well. Full disclosure, I have worked for him shooting Lockdown, but I really respect and enjoy his work as well. And also,
we have a very special relationship, Win and I. We have a very similar start as well. I might bring that up on another episode. I might even have him on too. But yeah,
you should. Win's great. I haven't necessarily spent a lot of time with him personally, but I respect his work, and what little dealings I've had with him professionally have all been great. So yeah, look, between you, Lynn, Gumboots, and Win, they're probably a lot of my influences, a lot of the artists I respect. So shout outs to all of you, and thank you for being on the journey with me.
And thank you, Josh, for being on the late night show. And I think it is 12:30. Wow, that's a record.
Sorry to have kept you up, William.
That's a record, mate.
For accommodating me.
Well, I appreciate your time, Josh, and I look forward to shooting ringside, a cage side, or match side of you sometime in the near future, post-COVID.
Yeah, let's hope it happens again soon. Well, let's just hope the world gets back to normal. And yeah, shout outs to the gyms and promotions that are doing it really tough right now. I hope all of you guys bounce back. I wouldn't be what I am if not for what you guys do. I know you're doing it really tough at the moment. So shout outs to you all, and best of luck for the future.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.
Peace!